Recently-ish, we got a surprise crossover between Native Instruments and Akai, where Native Instruments released plugins for the standalone MPCs, and these are basically adaptations of their Play series of plugins, which are kind of glorified sample/preset playback machines that target different buckets or different genres of music. And today, I made it my mission to test and preliminarily review all of them. A few general things about all of the plugins, and then I'll get into the specific ones one by one. First of all, I just want to put this up front. Akai did send these to me for review. That means that this video's existence is kind of an unintentional ad, although I will always be as true to my own opinions as possible. A couple more general things. These are incredibly slow to load, and I also want to put that up front, and I actually checked with a rep from Akai, and yes, that's a known thing. These load really slowly. I started loading a project when I started filming this, and it's still loading. And in fact, I timed loading one of these, and it took about 1 minute and 20 seconds to load a project, and that's because there are a lot of samples contained within these Native Instrument plugins, and switching through presets is also a giant pain, and that's just something that we have to deal with. At least that's something I have to deal with on my MPC One. And the official tutorial shows loading that stuff onto an SD card, so that's what I did, and it's slow. Second general thing, I think the price of these is very well worth taking into consideration, because in the past, the standalone extra paid plugins that Akai has released for their MPCs have been pretty expensive. These are pretty inexpensive, and I think that's commendable, and I think worth considering as we move through these. And in fact, part of my kind of rating system for these plugins is whether I think they're worth the approximately $30 a pop, or whether I think they're worth more or less. And for me, my recommendation, if you take away nothing else from this video, is it's probably worth just getting one that fits the sounds that you want, and then maybe ignore the rest for now. And then you could kind of get another one if you want to play with some new sounds later. I think $30 is worth it for some of the plugins if they happen to hit the target they're aiming for. And quick third overall thing, I'm a little bit wary of crossovers between companies like this because corporate consolidation ends up hurting the consumer in the long run. To me, this seems like kind of a one-off crossover, so I think it's cool. But if it went any further than this, I would have cause to be a little nervous, because things like mergers and private equity buyouts by these companies seem to always lead to a drop in quality, a rise in prices, worse support, people laid off, and it's just generally a bad time for everyone involved, except for the people who are making a lot of money from it. I just wanted to put that out there. I can't do this video and not mention that and feel good about it. All that being said, though, let's get into the individual plugins in the order in which I tried them. The first plugin I tried out is Analog Dreams, and let's put this up front, this one's my favorite. So this is just the default patch, and I started the song with this because I immediately came up with that little hook. So I'll show you a couple of the individual sounds. I think it nails the tone here. And we can take a quick opportunity to look at the controls that these generally follow. Filter cutoff. And the filter envelope time. XY motion, which I pretty much never use. So it controls that warbliness, which I usually don't find particularly useful, although in this patch it works. So you've got two layers, and then some controls for those layers. So general controls like format and pitch, envelopes for your amp and filters, a mod matrix that I will admit I haven't fully dove into yet, and effects. And we can swap out, say, this delay and show you that we've got like a granular delay, which is nice to have, as well as an octave delay, which I am a big fan of. Saturation, chorus, and flanger, and other such useful features. I really like the effects layout on all of these. I think that's a very welcome addition, and it's nice to have that built in. And then we're gonna pull up another one, and this is gonna take forever. See, I know the window's blown out, but I like the amount of light we're getting. I think that's nice. I think it's a welcome change from feeling like I'm in a dungeon constantly. Here's a second beat that I made with Analog Dreams. I should also mention that a lot of the drums that you're hearing throughout this video are from my $5 sample pack, linked in the description, helps keep the channel going. But real quick, here are a couple of the individual sounds. Another bass layer. Let me come back to that. Nice and dramatic. So as you can tell, I've been having a great time with some of these floatier and pluckier sounds, and I think Analog Dreams nails it, and I think it nails the genre pretty well. The leads, for my taste, are a little rough, and that's pretty consistent through a lot of these Native Instruments play plugins. So I've got two layers. Another layer. This one's actually not bad. In context, though, I'm just not sure how I feel about them. Admittedly, that could also be a skill issue, though. Here's one more beat. Hey, so real quick, this is a tangent, but I've had my MPC crash twice while filming this. I don't really know what to do with that information, but I feel like I should mention it. Also, I've had some issues with muting and unmuting, and I'll show you at least what seems to be working for me to fix it in a second. So you may have noticed I'm cheating a bit by using a single instance of HypeSynth for a pluck layer. I'm also using this from my key group pack, and then this bass pluck, which is a bit repetitive if it's soloed, also from my key group pack. That is neither here nor there. For track muting, I've been having issues with track mutes like seeming to randomly reset themselves. And also, by default, mine is on audio, which just cuts stuff off immediately, but I want the tails of like synths to still ring out. So you change it to event to get that to work. And then I've had a couple of issues that probably still need a bit more explanation, but it's worth checking if you're having mute automation getting written into your patterns without realizing it, which you can check if you go to grid and go to list. There might be a mute event at the very beginning, and you can then choose to delete that. I was still having issues though, and so the other thing that has helped is turning timing correct on and changing my time division to 1/16. Some other folks have said you should turn timing correct off, but my timing correct was off the entire time that I was having issues, and when I turned it on and changed it to a small time division, I was able to mute and unmute stuff in a predictable way, instead of me going to unmute a bunch of tracks at the beginning of a loop and then having it just ignore it. Hopefully that helps someone. I don't fully understand the exact behavior still, but I wanted to mention it because it doesn't seem like it's been mentioned a lot by a lot of other people. Regardless, this is my attempt to do something kind of akin to what you would find on like the synthwave stream on the Lo-Fi Girl channel, and I'm really happy with how this one turned out. So here are a couple of individual parts. It's a pretty nice bass. This is the hype patch we've already seen. Got just a bunch of little layers. So if it wasn't already obvious, I like this plugin a lot. I absolutely think it's worth the $30, and in fact, don't tell anyone this, but I probably would have paid more for it. Obviously, I've got a very pro synthwave bias, but because of that, I was more inclined to judge it harshly, and I do think it does a pretty good job with the standard shimmery, floaty, nostalgic sounds of the genre, and I like it a lot. Up next, the plugin aimed at techno, and I'm pretty sure this is how you pronounce it, Nacht. This one says it's aimed at the darker side of techno, and that's an interesting claim because I don't really know that it nails it. Check this out. So this does have some pretty cool sounds in it. For instance, this bass. Or this monstrous one. This part's kind of rough. It's muted. It's not awful, but it doesn't quite land for me. Some of these pad and effects sounds actually really nail the kind of dark, ethereal, foreboding feeling they're going for. Some of this other stuff really doesn't, though, and that's what's really odd to me about this. For instance, let me pull up a couple of other patches. A lot of these basses really don't hit for me. For instance, this sounds pretty dated to me. I don't think I would ever find myself using it in like a strictly techno application, at least not for the kind of subgenres and styles of techno that I personally listen to. Like, am I crazy, or does that sound like a different era and a different genre entirely? Like, it's got some cool stuff like this, which would almost be for a more like mid-tempo industrial adjacent thing. Even this one's kind of rough, to be honest. And one thing where it really falls flat is acid. This is the only patch that I could find that even is acid adjacent. And I would expect to find a little more acid in something that like explicitly says it's for techno, especially for like the kind of darker side of techno. And then the leads are generally even more dated sounding and kind of rough. Like, I'm not playing it in a way that's super flattering to it, but like, what else do you play with that? Am I crazy? Like, Like, this one's not bad, but I don't know that I would use it in a techno context, personally. In a weird sort of way, a lot of this plugin actually reminds me more of kind of 2012 era electro house, so I tried making that next. And even then, let's be real, that's kind of a mess. But I wanted to give it one more shot and take it at its word that it could be used for darker sounding stuff, so I attempted to make exactly that. So this works for me. As does this. So if I mute everything but my drums and my little rumble, that hits for me. And then the effects and pads, while still being hit or miss, are often appropriately spooky in nature. And then we've got this just abysmal ARP lead part. And that's like literally the one that fit the best with this track. And I kind of hate it. So for this plugin, I probably would say it's worth like $10. Probably not 30, just because it's so hit or miss and doesn't always seem to hit its genre target. That being said, I do really like a couple of the pad sounds and will continue to use them in other projects. Up next, Cloud Supply. A couple of individual layers. So some decent pad sounds in here. I'm going to be pretty blunt. I'm mostly indifferent to this one. I can dig a spacey trap beat, but it's not a genre I listen to a ton, so I'm probably the wrong person to have a strong opinion about this. But a lot of the sounds are either just neat or just kind of not for me. I can see someone else getting something cool out of this, but it doesn't really land for me. And then a lot of the leads kind of following the trend tend to be kind of rough. Although this one's not bad. One thing though is that there is kind of a lack of basses in this and an even bigger lack of 808 style stuff. Like this is as close as it gets. The rest of the basses seem to be more like this, and that's a strange omission for a trap-focused plugin. I don't know why that's what they went with. Like, would you ever use that? In a spacey trap beat, even? I wouldn't. And that's it. That's all the basses there are. So this one, I probably personally wouldn't pay $30 for. Maybe $5, but then again, I'm not necessarily in the target demo for this, so take that with a pretzel-sized grain of salt. Next up, we're taking a look at Sway. This one grew on me quite a lot. It's got some stuff that doesn't really seem to fit the genre that I do actually happen to like. But then it's also got some more kind of standard stuff. Something pretty soft. And then some stuff with like some personality. And that's what started off this track. That's nice. I like that a lot. This is the bass I actually ended up using. There's some basses I quite like in this. And then the pianos are hit or miss for me. This one is like nice and dusty sounding, and that's when it's at its best. The thing to note, though, is that for these pianos, there's not really any velocity sensitivity, it's just volume. So this is kind of the trade-off with a plugin like Fabric or the dedicated piano plugin that are both paid. You get something that's a bit more realistic that you can play across a keyboard. This, you're probably going to want to play something simpler and not want to expect it to behave like a real piano as much. And also the pianos in this are pretty hit or miss. So for instance, something like this, it's fine. A bit dry, maybe. Delay is probably a bit much. Some nice electric pianos. But don't expect them to be super expressive or realistic. They're definitely stylized. But you can absolutely make some nice lo-fi with this. Some of the leads are a little rough. I don't know that I would use that in a lo-fi track. That's not bad. Once again, I probably wouldn't use it in a lo-fi track, though. That one does not really tickle my brain. But to verify this wasn't just a one-off, I made another lo-fi beat, this time even more study-friendly. So I think we've heard this electric piano patch, and that is appropriately vibey. And I think some of the pads are a little hit or miss, but I like stuff like this quite a bit. And like these sounds have some personality. Like it fits for the kind of generic study lo-fi. I think it can accomplish that pretty well, but there's some actual character to some of these sounds, and I appreciate that. This is a little more basic. One of the better soft piano sounds. So I like this one quite a bit. I definitely think it's worth the $30. It's not perfect, but I like the character it has. I think it works well enough for the genre, and I will definitely continue to use it. The final plugin, Homage, or as I really want to say, Homage, I didn't quite know what to do with at first, and so I ended up accidentally making like 80s library music, like the kind of thing you'd see in a science documentary that's long been forgotten. And while I had fun making that, it's a bit silly and not really the tone that they're going for with this. So the intent for this one was to kind of recreate sounds from the LA beat scene. And it's not something I know a ton about, so take all of this with a grain of salt, but it's something I have some passing familiarity with. So I went and listened to some stuff kind of out of that style of music and took another crack at it. So I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the groove on this one, but it's at least hopefully close enough to kind of get a rough idea. We've got some appropriately dusty sounds. And I can get down with that for sure. And also some really nice shimmer. So that's a pretty good pairing, and I think those are two aspects of this style that you would want to have. I also didn't end up using this. It's kind of silly. I like this bass a lot. And then there's this one I didn't end up using. So I've got mixed feelings on this because sometimes they talk about the LA beat scene, which is like pretty specific, and then sometimes they talk about just lo-fi in general. I don't know that this would be my go-to for what like enters a lot of our brains when we hear the term lo-fi. However, it is lo-fi in character, and I think dusty in a way that is quite aesthetically pleasing. And so if you want to make something with a bit more grit to it, I think this is pretty cool, and something that's maybe a little more like rickety almost. There's a lot of stuff that sounds like it was kind of very DIY recorded, which is ironic for a product shipped by like a massive company, but you know. There's a lot of stuff that's like this that I personally don't really have a use for, but I could absolutely see the appeal of. But like, I probably would use that in some scenario. So for like study lo-fi, I don't think this would be my go-to. For something a bit grittier, I think it could be cool. I think it's probably worth the $30, but once again, take that with a grain of salt. If you'd like to see some more MPC stuff, you can check these videos out up over here, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching.